How's it going, everyone? In this video, we'll discuss a common statistic that's thrown around, which is that 50% of marriages end in divorce. Now, realistically, it's not exactly 50. It depends on the country. It depends on the decade. But there have been recent decades where in some countries, the percent of marriages that end in divorce was approximately 50%. But that doesn't mean what you think it means. And we're going to look at an example here to illustrate that. Let's say we have 6 couples here. Okay, so we have 6 marriages. And we're going to tell a story and see how that affects the divorce rate. Let's say 2 of these couples get divorced. Okay, so we've had 6 marriages and 2 divorces. And let's say they remarry. Let's say they remarry like so and like so. So basically they switch. All right, how many marriages is that? Well, that's 2 more, so we have 8 marriages in total. And let's say switching turned out to be not such a good idea and they end up getting divorced again. Okay, so in total, how many divorces is that? 4. So, what percentage of marriages ended in divorce? Well, 4 divorces out of 8 marriages. That is 50%. But how many people do we have in this whole story? We have 12 people. And how many of those people experienced divorce? 4 of them. 4 out of 12 is about 33%. So which number is true? Well, they're both true depending on what you're talking about. If you're asking what percent of marriages ended in divorce, 50%. But if you're asking what percent of people who get married experience divorce, well, that's only 33%, which means that 67%, right? That's 100 minus 33, 67% of people who got married stayed married and never experienced divorce. So the number thrown around, which makes people shocked and surprised, and it makes for a good news story, is 50% of marriages ending in divorce. And it sounds pessimistic. It sounds like, oh, it's a flip of a coin whether it works out or not. But if someone reports a more optimistic number, looking at not marriages ending in divorce, but married people who experience divorce, they could say, oh, 67% of married people stay married. Then it gives an opposite emotional response, and it gives a more a more optimistic feel with regards to stability of marriage, even though both numbers are true. Now, how can they both be true? Well, because a marriage and a person who gets married are different things, and they affect the numbers differently. Every divorce will necessarily increase the number of divorces by 1. But it will not necessarily increase the number of divorced people or people who've experienced divorce. It won't necessarily increase that number by 1. It might increase the number by 1 if, for example, someone gets divorced, marries someone else, and then they get divorced. Well, that's 1 new person who experiences divorce. Or it might increase the number of divorced people by 0, like in our original story, where 2 people who had been divorced before get divorced again. Number of people who have experienced divorce doesn't go up by 1 or anything. Or it could increase the number of divorced people who experienced divorce by 2, right? If neither of them had been divorced before. So these are different statistics, and usually when people look at these statistics, what they're wondering about is themselves, right? What are the chances that I will experience a divorce? Well, you are not a marriage. You are a person. And the statistic to look at is, what is the proportion of individuals who get married that experience divorce, which in our original story is 33%. Meaning that 67% stay married, right? Whereas the statistic of what percent of marriages end in divorce is the misleading stat. Now, in this particular example, looking at the percentage of people who experience divorce gives us optimism, right? Because it's lower than the percent of marriages that end in divorce. We could come up with a scenario that's different. Okay? So for example, let's say we have 4 couples. And let's say they all get divorced and 2 of them remarry in this manner. So that's 2 more marriages. So in total we have 6 marriages, and we had 4 divorces. So what percent of marriages ended in divorce? 4 out of 6. That's about 67%. But what percent of people experienced divorce? Well, all of these 8 people experienced divorce. That's 100%. So in our first scenario, the percentage of married people who experience divorce is lower than the percentage of marriages that end in divorce. And in our second scenario, the percentage of married people who experience divorce is higher than the percentage of marriages that end in divorce. So depending on what story unfolds, looking at the percentage of people who get married and experience divorce could be a higher percentage or a lower percentage than the percent of marriages ending in divorce. The point is, it's different. It's a different statistic. And if you're interested in what experience a person is likely to have, looking at the stat of marriages ending in divorce is misleading. So, I hope you enjoyed that, and until next time.